And I went through a really rough year of suffering, business, family, things kind of falling apart. I got invited to a real estate meeting, and I didn't want to go. I just felt sad and depressed, but I was like, okay, I'll go just to get out of the house. And it was at a church coffee shop. It was like one of these mega churches, coffee shop. I was like, When we left the meeting, there was a sign that said prayer garden, and it was pointing. And I was leaving, but then I was like, oh, man, God's been up to something. I feel this drawing to go to this prayer garden. By the way, this was the first time I'd been in a church building in like 2 years. So I go out, and the prayer garden has like this gazebo. There's books in it. And it had just rained. And the books were like wet. And like the pages were messed up. And the flowers hadn't been weeded. The garden was kind of in disarray. And I sat in that gazebo, and my thoughts were, man, I feel bad for this pastor. I know this thing is on his budget list. Nobody takes care of it. Like, they don't have any interest in it. They just have it because you're supposed to have a prayer garden. Like, they had space. They filled the space. Nobody gives a crap. He has to deal with it. All of this. Like, I had all this cynicism. And then I felt the Lord speak to me and say, but you're here and you're using it. And I was like, man. And that broke me. And I went to that church that next Sunday. And that was how I came back to church. Whole process in all of that, that's the short, like, this is when God intervened part. But, I eventually found my way back to the Pentecostal church, and that's where I go now.
He starts pointing out to the Holy Spirit that, well, why do you have this plant? It has thorns on it. Why do you have this plant? It's venomous. And she simply responds to him saying, well, we created those too. That's part of who you are. In a world that's pain and gray. Right? So it's like, when you started talking about a prayer garden, I was like, yeah. Because life, I would love, Daniel, I would love to say, hey, we can establish our life on the 14 points of our doctrinal statement. Just neatly pack it up and have it there. And just teach that and suppress the other. But if I suppress the other, at some point, it's going to explode. And that explosion is going to show up in different areas, such as alcohol abuse, drug abuse, sexual abuse, this idea of gifting over serving, right? And you talked about this kind of mega church complex, and not the mega church complex. That's what I'm going to talk about. You said this was at like a mega church, so yeah. And you found God again speaking to you there in the prayer garden, not in the sanctuary. So no. Why did you go to the mega church? Perhaps it's compound. Did you go to the mega church because you found God there, or was it like a safe place where you can transition back into? Because most mega churches, you get to hide a lot. Like the regular parishioner for a mega church, you don't even see their faces. Like, I don't know how this mega church is set up, but most mega churches have the lights turned off and the only lights are on the stage because those are the important people.
Yeah. I think it was that, like the latter. It was an easy way back in because I would go and I would show up late and I would sit in the back. They had the lights off. So I made sure to sit in the area that was so dark that like the camera would never focus on me because they had cameras. And all
Oh
that
yeah,
stuff too.
because you got to show that on the social media, how your people worship,
Yeah.
instead of letting them worship the Lord in genuinely, spirit and truth.
Yeah, right. And I hate that. That's a whole nother thing. I don't know. I have strong beliefs about worship being recorded, especially Pentecostal worship, and especially youth camps. I really hate that they stream youth camps now. I couldn't imagine being 15 years old, having a Holy Ghost moment, and worrying about my friends at high school seeing it on Monday. You know, like I don't. But anyway, yeah. You know, I will say this about this church, and it wasn't a huge mega church. I would say 800 to 1,000 on Sunday morning. They had like 2 or 3 services. Yeah. And it was Evangelical Presbyterian, which is basically evangelical. It's just the generic evangelical. But the first Sunday back, he did a sermon on prayer, and we physically wrote down our prayer request on pieces of paper, and had this exercise in which we kept them with us. And I don't know, it was actually very meaningful. It was very meaningful. And I went there for 3 weeks, and then he did a whole series on abortion, and I was out. I was like, damn it, here too.
That's why changing the denomination doesn't. I mean, you're evangelical, or you're usually right winged. If you're reformed, you're usually either moderate left or left winged. That's basically the way it goes. With maybe the exception being Sproul, but I think this is huge because we've touched on 2 things, right? What the role of pastor is in itself, right? Because you got disattention or non-attention, neglect from the overseer who is supposed to be pastoring his own pastors. That's kind of the setup there, right? And I think that's an epidemic in general, which could be a whole nother episode, but the voice of truth, Casting Crowns, tells you is still with you. It's like he is not putting the rules over the relationship. Like God is actively involved, even though you turned your back on him, as they would say in our faith, right? You're not praying for a year. You've turned your back on God. You've lost your salvation. You need to get right with Jesus. Going to have to get baptized again and everything. But even though you're this, and I'm using this metaphorically, you're this lost sheep, it's like God activates people that are not pastors to pastor you back into the fold. And then like John 10, right. My sheep know my voice, right? So
yeah,
it's like you kind of got stuck and left behind, and your heart was bleeding out with not bleeding out with a D, bleating as a lamb bleats for the shepherd to come find him. No? And I think of Ezekiel 34 when I think of this whole abandonment and mega church culture. And I'm going to read it, Daniel, or if you want to read it, it's
go right
okay.
ahead.
I have it here.
I don't have it up.
I have my my youth Bible. Yeah. Oh, the cool Bible, right? I only have 2 Bibles in English. It's either this or King James Version. And I didn't want to go King James Version just yet.
Not yet. We're not ready for that.
But this is going to be a long site. So we're talking 2 to 10, 8 verses, okay? Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds, the leaders of Israel. Give them this message from the sovereign Lord. What sorrow awaits you, shepherds who feed yourselves instead of flocks. Shouldn't shepherds feed their sheep? You drink the milk, wear the wool, and butcher the best animals, but you let your flocks starve. You have not taken care of the weak. You have not tended the sick or bound up the injured. You have not gone looking for those who have wandered away and are lost. Star that last verse 4, especially that last part, right? You have not tended the sick, bound up the injured. You have not gone looking for those who have wandered away and are lost. Instead, you have ruled over them with harshness and cruelty. So, my sheep have been scattered without a shepherd. Doesn't that sound like the deconstruction movement? I mean, and they are easy prey for any wild animal. And that makes me automatically think about Peter. The devil walks around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. They have wandered through all the mountains and all the hills across the face of the earth, yet no one has gone to search for them. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As surely as I live, I say, the sovereign Lord, you abandoned my flock and left them to be attacked by every wild animal. And though you were my shepherds, you didn't search for my sheep when they were lost. You took care of yourselves and left the sheep to starve. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. I love how he just reiterates, hey, listen to the Lord, listen to the Lord, listen to the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord said. I now consider those shepherds my enemies, and I will hold them responsible for what has happened to my flock. I will take away their right to feed the flock, and I will stop them from feeding themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouths, speaking now of the shepherds as the wild animals devouring the sheep. Like I said, most of our pastors aren't shepherds. They're well, not most of our pastors. I mean, they're wolves, right? So he says, I will rescue my flock from their mouths. The sheep will no longer be their prey. And it's like, that is the Old Testament shadow, going back into the Jungian metaphor, that we all have to face and we all have to grapple with in ministry. But God is not as worried about your ministry as you and as the people you minister to. They're more important. You're more important. Okay? So when we talk about goals and this kind of systematic institutional mega church culture, we have people sitting in pews that literally are invisible, and all the lights are on the stage. And the problem with that, well, first of all, that's not a body, that's a production. Second, what happens when production fails? Right? So we have these big names failing left and right. Like the megachurch movement for me is done. It's done. I mean, it's not just in the U.S. It's here in Argentina as well. So just to give you an example, there was this huge union, the Assembly of God here in Argentina. It used to be Church of God. His name is Ledesma. And he invited the president of Argentina, who is ultra right-wing conservative, to his church, to his new church building, to inaugurate his pulpit, because the president's slogan was the forces of heaven accompany us. Now, he's more of a Jewish leaning. He follows Jewish practice. But, I mean, with that kind of slogan, what he purport, he's against abortion, he's against, right? So the church is kind of wrapping itself up again in this kind of political stance. And to allow the president, I understand, I mean, it's not, I don't have a problem with the president coming and speaking at your church. That's awesome, man. If you can have that happen, that's awesome. Don't have him preach. He's not a preacher, right? But that's what happened. And Ledesma gets up after the message and says, hey guys, I just checked out our accounts, and what we had as 100,000 pesos, which is about $100, we're about 1,001, is now $100,000. That's my God. That's the God of transformation. And now he has the Argentine version of the IRS on him because you just multiplied your money by 1,000. Is that real? Is that a real? I'm not a non-believer in miracles, right? But megachurch culture does tend towards this. I mean, we talk about Brian Houston, Carl Lentz, Hillsong, right? We talk about Mark Driscoll in Mars Hill, right? In the abuse of power, right? So, and even Brian Houston's father, Frank Houston, which, I mean, they moved from New Zealand to Australia because the Union of Assemblies of God moved him. Okay. They did not revoke his credentials, even having people testify that they were sexually abused by him. Then he and his son tried to buy those victims off instead of saying, my father was wrong. And the Assemblies of God, instead of saying, you committed an egregious act to a minor, right? Okay, these are things that documentaries are on, right? Podcasts are about. That, I mean, it's not just in the States; it's worldwide, right? So,
Yeah.
what is the megachurch culture? I have to be honest with you. I've never attended a megachurch. I've never attended a megachurch. So when we think about megachurch culture, I'm looking at it from the outside, because, I mean, I can get the videos, right? Anybody can become a member of Elevation Church. Just sign up in our Google Forms and send us your tithes, and Stephen Furtick will preach to you every Sunday, right? Great preacher. Carl Lentz was a great preacher. Bethel.
Good orators.
No, they're awesome, right? But that's not a pastor. What's your thoughts then on this mega church culture? Because I think that's what's taking over and perhaps leading to one of the greatest, if it's not systemic as far as denomination, it is systemic in megachurches, because most megachurches are independent, or they are connected to an association, but they're not part of a denomination, right? They're their own brand. They do branding instead of denominations. How do you see this playing into deconstructionism?
All right. So I think, to answer your question, megachurches in a lot of ways are denominations unto themselves, at least here in the States. Like Elevation. I mean, there's a central church, but then he has churches everywhere. And I think he's like all over the country now, and they just pipe in his sermons. Even in the Church of God, mega churches are their own denomination. You take like Central Church of God here in Charlotte, they do their own youth camp. They don't send their kids to denominational stuff. They do their own camp meeting. Like, they're unto themselves. And they get away with stuff, like a lot of stuff. And I'm not going to out people, but if you've been in the Church of God long enough, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay? So you were talking about how Carl Lentz, all these people, when scandals hit and you discover there's like been a cover up before it actually hits, it's an interesting thing to see play out, but it also happens denominationally. So God, this is where they're going to get us, Chris. This is where the Church of God, CIA, is going to come after me.
Okay. They're going to come after me too, because I have a comment about what you're just about to say.
Okay. I don't know. I recorded the General Assembly onto a hard drive. I went to work. I set it up. It would record. I didn't miss any of it. There's a conversation that happens on the floor in which an ordained bishop from North Carolina stands up and tells the story, and I have the clip, tells the story of, as I recall it, a child in his family that was molested by a pastor in the Church of God. And it was known about. The denomination did not pursue it. They moved him from that church to another church, and they cut the live stream off because they knew what was coming up was not good. So I don't know what was said after that, but I have it up until that point. So, and I know the guy. The guy's a good guy, not a liar. I know the guy, and it's definitely goes on. And
yeah, it happens down here as well. This is why for example, if you sin, you're human, right? There are levels of sin, whether we like it or not under the blood of Christ, but there are levels of sin. Like if you take, for example, in Leviticus, everybody's favorite book of the Bible, if you take, if you make a sin knowingly and you're just part of the congregation, right? You can, and you're poor, you can take doves and sacrifice them. If you're a leader of the family, of the family, it has to be a sheep, a lamb. If you're a leader,
higher value, more cost,
right? You have to take what's it called in English? Chivo in Spanish.
A bull?
No, it's the one right before that. And a ram. You have to take a ram. And then if you are a leader of your tribe, you have to, or you're a priest, you have to take a bull, right? One of the red heifers, right? So, I mean, if you sin, you sin, and if you're in the megachurch and you sin, you got to pay the bull. But what hurts worse than having the figure, like there are people that I've looked up to, and we were talking about this before the recording. Ravi Zacharias, I'm sorry, I went Spanish on you. Ravi Zachariah, Robert Morris, recently, Michael Tate, and you were talking about Jimmy Swaggart just passed away, right? So Carl Lentz. So these are people that we unconsciously put our trust in, and that's because of what we're doing right now, right? So, for example, we had a similar story here in Argentina that I have firsthand knowledge about, that there was sexual abuse. There was a church court established. The minister was found as guilty, completed his sentence, right? They moved him to another region and now wants to know where he can minister at, right? Now, here's my thing. You took advantage of a sheep once, and I'm not against second chances, but I don't think you get to come back to that role. That might be controversial for some people, but I mean, we're talking about a bishop as well. See, okay, so I mean, there are levels here. You don't get to go back to that because everybody had you for so many years at this image, right? And that's what it's like. With intention. It's like when you add the words for any kind of court case with intention, the sentence becomes longer, right? And so I think there are certain things you don't get to come back from. So I talked about ledesma, right? And changing $100,000 to $100,000, right? It's on film. The government is after them for, well, not tax evasion, but falsifying their tax reports, right, of what they have, because you still have to do that whether you're a nonprofit or not. You have to file. You don't have, you're tax exempt, but you do have to file. At least here in Argentina, I wouldn't know. In the U.S., I'm not profit. I'm just regular old missionary, and I don't think you get to build other buildings, and I don't think that while this is happening, you get to pastor, because you're dragging the name of Christ through the mud, right?
Yeah, in the Church of God, as you know, but our listeners might not, the only thing you can't come back from as a minister is homosexual sex, like the being gay. Now you can abuse, but being gay,
children,
yeah, right.
I have
right
who then go to other regions to get their educational theology. I'll give you an example. There was this one minister that wanted to attend to my seminary. And in his city, he was accused and went to jail for abusing a minor with Down syndrome. And he acted like he was demon-possessed, and he didn't know where he was. His wife said he was intoxicated and all that other stuff. I'm like, you guys aren't making this any better. And so I literally blocked him. I don't trust you, right? One of the qualifiers are how do you say that in English? Not unable to be reproached, or
above reproach.
Above reproach, right? So when you're on the national news, or you're abusing minors, okay, we are no longer talking about sin. We are talking about sin, but not by itself. We're talking about crime, right? And we are supposed to look for, my accent came out there, right? We are supposed to actively seek justice, right? And so, and here, I'll just go ahead and get into it, Daniel, because I'm in Argentina, so it doesn't really matter. Like Trump, I mean, we have the list. The list was already submitted, right? And we were talking about this the other day. So why was I forget her. What was the girl's Maxine or
Maxine, yeah. Ghislaine.
Ghislaine. Okay.
Ghislaine.
And Jeremy Epstein. Why were they imprisoned?
Who knows, man?
I mean, there's no list. They didn't wrong. He killed himself because they were defaming him, I guess.
Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself.
Right. And
Sorry, I throw that in there.
Yeah, no. That I mean, I don't think so either.
Right.
And so when you have both sides against it, okay, what does the church do? Right? I automatically think, Daniel, when I think about these things and how we get entangled in politics, not only in church but in politics in our countries.
National.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, Ledesma let our president speak in his pulpit, right? And Donald Trump has done the same thing.
Yes, and Kamala too. And,
Kamala.
I always say her name wrong, and I don't mean to. Yes.
We'll say it's you're talking too much to your Argentine friend, and we do say Kamala. Yeah. So okay. If it's Kamala, we're sorry. Kamala, or we're just gonna call you Kamala.
Kama.
Right. Right. Both sides are against this, and the church has to take a stand. I mean, you can't.
Well.
You have to take a stand here. My mind automatically goes, going back to our cold open in the last episode, right? Going into our cold open, I automatically think about Eric Metaxas's biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, right? I don't know if you've read that or not, but it's
I'm familiar.
Okay,
yes,
right. It's called. I have it here. Pastor, martyr, prophet, and spy. Right? So he's not entangled with the German church. He's actively fighting against the German church. And they throw him out of his denomination, starts a new seminary, gets persecuted. His family are sympathetic to the Nazis. Right? And the only reason he gets killed, he gives his life for Christ for standing up against Hitler as being part of the Valkyrie Project, right? If you haven't seen that movie, go watch it. Spoiler alert, doesn't work.
Yep. And do you know, just an interjection here, the Valkyrie Project that didn't work was July 20th, 1944. Hitler immediately claimed divine providence and said, that this missed assassination attempt is evidence that God is on my side, right? And this is exactly the same thing Donald Trump did with his assassination attempt, is to say, this is evidence that God is on my side. Interestingly, Eric Metaxas turns out to be a right-wing extremist. I don't know if you know this or not. So
I am unaware of his political stance. Yes, I have.
So here in the States, among Christian scholarship, there's a lot of criticism of his biography of Bonhoeffer. But,
oh wow, I wasn't trying to be controversial, but I'm glad I
No,
was.
and you were. Yeah. So I think, I don't know, my brain works weird. To me, I'm seeing this convergence where, like, the whole celebrity culture in church, which has fueled the megachurch movement, because in America, we love our celebrities. Like Hollywood back in the day was the jam. And I say back in the day because what brought Hollywood down was Weinstein, right? Like, that's the name, right? Yeah, Harvey. Sexual scandal, Me Too, hashtag Me Too, right? So, I mean, Hollywood is pretty much gutted now. My daughter is studying film, and before she went to college, I knew a guy who was in the industry, and I asked him to write her an email, like his words of wisdom. And one of his words of wisdom was, don't come to Hollywood. We're not doing anything here. It's too expensive to do anything here. You know, all these other places is where movies are moving. So that has somewhat deconstructed. But we do love our celebrities. And one of the reasons, do I now?
They're all going to Atlanta now. I've been surprised at the credits at the end, especially the Marvels, right? So I don't know if we can say Marvel, and then we're not going to get deep breaks, right? So they're all going to Atlanta now, which would be better for you anyways. You can see your daughter on the weekends.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Wilmington and Charlotte a little bit, but so that came tumbling down. We see it in church with this celebrity culture, and one of the reasons we have it, especially in the Pentecostal church, I actually had a African American pastor explain this to me, because there is like within every church tradition, but within like lower economic class, what they do sometimes is they live vicariously through their pastor. So I can't have a BMW, but pastor's going to have one. I can't have a big house, but pastor's going to have one. And then success also, right? So then in America, successful is like reaching that celebrity pinnacle, right? Like being known, being well known, having the resources, influence, those kinds of things. It's all getting tangled up. You know, we're seeing like this entanglement of the church with the government, and it's always a tedious relationship. But in the current administration, there's an uncomfortable merger of the two. And oddly enough, the Church of God, if you look at pictures of the Faith Commission or whatever it is Donald Trump's created, Church of God, Assemblies of God is like way bigger than us. I say us, the Church of God. But when you look at those pictures, it's crazy how many of them are Church of God. It's unnerving. And a few of them we know, right? But I think to answer your question, you said the church is going to have to like have a response to this. This comes back to the whole Bonhoeffer thing. There is a church that is so deeply embedded in the government and the political system that is already so good and okay with cover-ups that they've already crossed that moral bridge, and they burned it. So they have no moral underpinning. That church, I don't think, will ever respond in a just way. There has to be the emergence of a confessional church in the shadow of empire. And I personally don't think that can happen under the shadow of denominationalism, because the structures have become identical and they're using the same methods. I mean, you were mentioning the Epstein list. What did Trump do today? He's just gaslighting the entire population. He's calling everyone that wants accountability, this is literally what he said today, stupid and weak. This is exactly what we were talking about earlier. This is what they do. They blame everyone else for the things they're complicit in.
Okay, and to let the
everyone else
audience
feel
know,
bad.
I'm sorry I'm interjecting so much, Daniel. Just to let the audience know, we pre-record these things, so today's the 16th of July.
Yes.
Okay, so this is what Daniel is referencing. Go ahead, brother.
Yes, earlier today. Yeah. So, I don't know. Celebrity culture, sex abuse scandals, cover ups, political power, justified violence, which we're seeing not just in foreign affairs, but with immigration here in the States and ICE and the mistreatment of immigrants. I mean, we have a place called Alligator Alcatraz. And if what is being said by the people that are there is true, I don't know why we're not like doing something. And here in the States, we're at kind of a place where we don't know what to do. It's really a tough situation to be in. But yeah, all those things are tangled up. They're tangled up for us right now. They're all sort of together. So I don't know. We need to have an answer. But there has to be the emergence of voices that are not in unholy relationship with the system.
Yeah, when you make the system your god, and I think that's what's kind of happening. You make the system your god, or you make a pastor or a leader your god, right? So, talking about these people with these sexual scandals, Michael Tate, 20 years abusing alcohol, cocaine, and molesting men and women, right? And he admits to it. Okay? And supposedly this was the known secret in Nashville, where is the basic hub for CCM, Christian contemporary music, right? How many others? How many others?
Right.
And this goes only for the superstars. We're talking the Brian Houstons, the Carl Lentzes, the TD Jakes, the I don't know, the list goes on and on, man. Michael Tate, Ravi Zachariah, right? These are just the names that are off the top of my head. Like, if I had to enumerate the scandals, right? This is what got me into deconstructionism, because the critique of the culture is that we aren't real. And my critique of the Christian culture is the same, right? So we leave, for example, evangelism is for the evangelists, right? No, that's for the disciples. Now, there are evangelists, don't get me wrong, that is a ministry. But that was before any kind of church government was set up. That was before the coming of the Holy Spirit in Pentecost, the indwelling of the Holy Spirit in manifestation of gifts and ministries, right? Jesus charges his church, his disciples, you should evangelize. How many people don't talk about Jesus? Like, you and I are chaplains, so we do. I don't get paid to do chaplaincy. I don't know your situation. You don't have to say it. But, like, I have a ministry where I do chaplaincy for taxi drivers, because down here in Argentina, it's cheaper for me to move in buses and in taxis than to buy a car, because we have insane importation costs. But and we have no Argentine factory, no Argentine model cars. They don't we don't have our own models of car, so they're all imported.
Right.
And either I buy a car from the 70s that I'm basically going to have to rebuild from the ground up with my budget, or I use taxis and buses. And I go in taxis a lot because, well, it's easier. We get there faster. And it's about the same price that I would use for a bus right now for the distances that we travel. Be that as it may, when I speak in Spanish, I speak well enough in Spanish that the people think I'm Argentine, but they can't quite distinguish where I'm from. So, like, different provinces have their different accents. And so they ask,
Right.
from. Well, that's my hook, right? I'm from the U.S. Oh, you visiting? No, I've been here for 15 years. What in the world are you doing in Argentina for 15 years being a U.S. citizen? Why haven't you left? Okay, and that's my hook to get people to talk about Christ, and it even got to a point when I lived in Tucumán, which is a province south here, that when I would leave the seminary, I would call the same taxi driver, not because I was a loyal customer, because it doesn't matter to me who takes me where I'm going, whatever. It's because I know he was living with his girlfriend who was about to have a baby, and he had to tell his wife about it because he was going to leave her to go with his girlfriend, right? So, and he has children with his wife. And so how you manage all of this, he's trying to get counsel from me, and I'm like, well, first things first. I mean, if you're not willing to be regenerated, and I mean that seriously, I mean, if you're not willing to become something else, then no amount of counseling that I give you, which I have no problem counseling you, I have no problem on the way home, we talk about this, I'll be an open ear, and I'll give you my advice. But the only thing that will change this situation is the power of the Holy Spirit, right? So it's like when you start seeing systems above the Spirit, that's when people like yourself and myself and other people that are listening, you guys that are listening, we have to stand up. It doesn't matter who's saying it. Like, it doesn't, I don't care if, who's the new general overseer? I'm sorry, I'm still stuck on Timothy Hill. We don't have...
Gary Lewis.
Gary Lewis. I don't care if Gary Lewis says it. If Gary Lewis is wrong according to the Bible, according to biblical principles, we have to call that out, right? So one of my things is, we're a church as a body, and I was talking to one of the Council of 18. He came down for our national convention, and I was his translator. And so, I mean, he doesn't speak any Spanish at all, so I had to be with him the entire time. I was like, and I asked him openly, I was like, so what's your vision for the worldwide Church of God? Right? He starts giving me all this stuff. And love him, by the way. Great guy. Great heart. And you can tell that he's actually concerned about missions. There are things that he lacks knowledge in because he's not a missionary, even though he has businesses in other countries. I said, one of the main things I see in this system that's wrong for me is that we're McDonald's, right? So McDonald's is the same wherever you go. Now, they may have nuances for local customers, but a Big Mac's a Big Mac. And a Big Mac will always be on the menu, okay? And so what we do, instead of having a worldwide church, we have a U.S. church that has systematically put its different locales in different places around the world. So when I start questioning, for example, pre-tribulation rapture, like you mentioned, people hear feathers are ruffled. And then I pull out the minutes and I say, hey, this is our doctrine. This is what we agreed upon. Okay, we have MIP, we have CAMS and all that other stuff, right? But that's not the official doctrine of the Church of God. This is the official doctrine of the Church of God, right? And it says we're premillennialists. Now, I don't know your position on it or whatever, but it never defines our position on when the rapture happens. And when people find that out, it's like their mouth drops. And I'm like, so you're part of a system that you don't even know what it does, what it believes. And I think that's where most Christians find themselves at. And what I would encourage, Daniel, is to study this and in an objective manner. That's impossible, first of all, what I'm asking, because we are subjects and we are subjective.
No biases.
We Enrique Dussel is an Argentine philosopher, and he talks about this. He says, I know, he quoted Jacques Derrida, who is basically the founder of postmodernism philosophically. He said it's the subjective subject who calls his object objective. Okay, so let me unpack that. It's like when we say we're being objective, even our saying of being objective is subjective. I can never take the subject out. I can never take my opinions and my conscious thought out of what I'm saying and doing. So even now, while we're talking and we're talking against a system, there are things that are in play that we're doing where we're calling to action people within systems and saying systems aren't bad, but perhaps the way out, Daniel, and this is something, we're kind of going off the script here, but perhaps the way out is a more organic and fluid system that is more subjective and doesn't pretend to be objective. Because I feel like the Church of God pretends to be objective in that your Council of 18 has 3 people that aren't from the U.S. What would that look like? Every other country in the world that has the Church of God has its own national assembly, except for the U.S. The U.S. has the World Assembly, the General Assembly.
Right.
What would the General Assembly look like if it were in South America? Who would be our General Overseer? There's no chance. There's no chance. I mean, the Hispanic division of Latin America, like our heroes are Bonilla, they're David Ramirez, they're Samuel Pagan, because they got up into the ranks. But I'm just naming 3. I don't know if I'm making myself clear here, Daniel, but where I'm trying to hit at is that the systemic problems that cause deconstruction, the loss of confidence, is that we do have replacements for our relationship with Christ. So it's
with one another.
And with one another.
God is concerned about people. And to me, pastoral care lies at the heart of what it means to be church. But systems, institutions, when they get to a certain part of their evolution, they're only trying to sustain themselves and protect themselves. And that becomes like tantamount, like that's the most important thing, or paramount, I should say. That's the most important thing. And then people get lost in the mix, but that's not what it's about. Like that's the whole Ezekiel thing, right? Is like the people matter. You know, you're hurting people, and that's what it's all about. And so I don't have all the answers, but I think it looks like something like a church that is more focused on people than on programs or politics, even doctrine, in my opinion. You know, it's like when you major in those things and minor in people, you're missing the gospel. You're missing it. You know, Jesus' apocalyptic vision of the judgment day, where he separates the sheep and the goats in Matthew 25, they're not separated based on their doctrine or their beliefs or what church they were part of. They're judged on, did you give me water when I was thirsty? Did you visit me in prison? Did you take care of me when I was sick? Did you clothe me when I was naked? And of course they say, when did we do this? And Jesus said, every time you've done it to the least of these, you've done it unto me. And so, by the way, Chris Green, do you know who Chris Green is? He taught at seminary. So he's a Pentecostal holiness scholar, but he taught at the seminary for years. Brilliant.
I just went to Lee University. I didn't go to the seminary. I didn't go to Pentecostal.
Okay. So he does this thing where he riffs off of, because it's all in Matthew, and he riffs off the Sermon on the Mount, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. And then in the apocalypse or the judgment day of Matthew 25, he separates them by the right and the left, and they both say, when did we do this? They didn't know, right? And so the message there is that the sheep did it from a place of conviction and compassion and love for their neighbor that was inspired through Christ and the Holy Spirit. They didn't even know. Like, that was unconscious. Like, that became their unconscious ethic, not the survival mode of the movement or the denomination. And I just today, as a chaplain, which, by the way, is my career, full-time job, but I was presenting to these healthcare professionals, and I was teaching them what pastoral care is. And I don't know their faith. I don't know if they're spiritual. I don't know if they have any training for pastoral ministry. But I used the example of, like, tragedy. We've had a lot of floods here lately. When a place floods, Samaritan's Purse may come in and set up a tent. But who comes to it? Baptists, Methodists, Muslims, Jehovah's Witness. And the mission is people. And all of them, despite their faith, are compelled to take care of people, the most at their most vulnerable, at the point of their pain. And so, to me, that seems to be the crux of the matter. We can have systems, we can have rules, we can have institutions, but those institutions must serve and meet the felt needs of the people, else they become what politics is, and they're just a beast. They're not shepherds. And politics is always a beast. I mean, that's the message of Revelation. Even the best politics, it's like Jesus said, a little leaven leavens the whole loaf, right? And so anytime the church starts embedding itself or allowing politics to be embedded in its ethos, its ethics, it is ruined. The leaven is in the loaf. The power has already corrupted, period. And when we seek power, we are not serving people. That's the telltale sign. Once you're pursuing power, you're not serving people, because serving people the way Jesus taught was washing feet, loving your neighbor, loving your enemy, and going to the cross. And that does not look like power. Jesus said the least of these will be the greatest. So, I don't know. That's my sermon for the night.
Right? And if we're not willing to adapt as a church in general, whether it be a denomination or the church in general, if we're not willing to adapt, if we're not willing to hear what the world is saying, right? It makes me think of Bartimaeus. You know, I mean, there are Bartimaeus all around us.
Yeah.
So Jesus is on the move. He hasn't stopped being on the move.
No.
But Bartimaeus hears that he's coming and cries out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me.
Have mercy on me.
There are still people crying out to Jesus saying, Jesus, have mercy on me. But the ministry of Jesus is carried out through the Spirit-filled Christians who continue the ministry of Jesus on the earth. Now, if we don't have the Spirit of Christ in us, we're not even going to be able to hear their cry, because he had multitudes following him. I mean, I think about the woman with the issue of blood. He had multitudes. I mean, people were pressing in on him, and he says, who touched me, right?
Yeah.
The marginalized people, the Samaritan, a Phoenician, Syro-Phoenician woman that called out. And his system, he was high. I mean, it depends on your exegesis, but I think he was highlighting the system when he says,
oh, yeah,
the dogs. I can't give to the dogs what's meant for the children. And I think that's what we have. Like the few that do, we're part of the breadcrumbs that fall, you know? And I wonder if we can find a generation that says, no, there are no dogs. God is not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to redemption in Christ. But we're so ready that so many groups perish. We make them...
Yeah, we want it. Yeah. Yeah. And that passage with blind Bartimaeus, I don't know if I think it's the Matthew retelling of that. The scene after that is Jesus cleansing the temple. Yeah. And what happens when Jesus cleanses the temple, the Bible said, I'm pretty sure it's a Matthew telling, the children filled the temple and started saying Hosanna. And that, in that gospel, was the point in which the Sadducees and Pharisees said, we got to kill this guy. We got to kill him. That's kind of the turning point. And he critiqued their use of dominance in the temple right after this blind Bartimaeus story, which, for those who don't know, is a story in which a blind man cries out for help, and the disciples try to silence him, and Jesus stops them and heals the man. And then the same thing happens at the temple. He goes there and he kind of cleanses out these people who are trying to be a buffer between the common people and God. And they felt like that this was their authority. Yeah.
So, these people are filtering out who actually gets to come to God, right? And I wonder if we do the same thing, like we filter out who gets to come to God. We say if you're allowed or not. Okay, here's my problem. I didn't choose God, God chose me. Right? And if God chose me, I'm nobody. You grew up in the Church of God, right? And I'm not going to reveal your familiar ties to the Church of God, but they're strong. They're high, upper echelon, right? And so I'm absolutely nobody. Like, I came from the Baptist church. I just had a vision from the Lord that I need to be a missionary in Argentina. And everything that I have is because the Lord has given it to me. But I can't sit. The other day, I heard this from the Spirit. The other day, I heard in the Spirit that in the church, too many people want to sit in the seat of Moses, and not enough people want to sit at the mercy seat.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the megachurch complex is. Let me do it. And the let me do it means I don't need God. I'm sufficient. But if we go back to John 15, he said, apart from me, you can do nothing.
Right. Good stuff.
Well, man, I don't. I think we're finishing up here. I think we still have to talk about these scandals and how they affect the church. How does the church come back out from this? And I kind of want to, in the next episode, pick up where we left off, and kind of riff off this idea, what you were talking about, that Jesus cleanses the temple and the children come in. And this prophecy, before the day of the Lord, the hearts of the fathers will be turned to the children, and the hearts of the children will be returned to the fathers, right? And so we won't be looking for what was in the past anymore. But I don't want to take any more of your time or our leaders,
it's been good.
Our listeners' time, brother. I really could keep chatting with you, but that's why we'll keep doing episodes.
Yeah, man, it's been good. We covered all the ground. We got more to cover, so make sure to like and subscribe. Share it with your friends. Share it with people you think might benefit from it. And let us know, like, if there's something you want us to cover or talk about. Put it in the comments. Shoot us a message. Something. Just let us know, and we'd love to address your concerns as well.